The United Nations reportedly has already drafted a plan. It was leaked to my next guest, Matthew Lee of Inner City Press. He broke the story. Now, the report proposes 200 military observers for Libya to begin with a multinational force, up to 190 UN police. It also outlines plans for elections within 9 months and an interim government before that. But under what mandate? Matthew Lee is here to tell us what gives. Matthew, thanks for being with us. So first off, what mandate is the UN operating under with this proposal for what a post-conflict Libya should look like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot. I mean, right now, they really don't have a mandate. That's what I found so surprising when I was able to get this document. I mean, when Resolution 1973 was passed, which authorized a no-fly zone and the protection of civilians in Libya, the UN was assigned a role to somehow coordinate or at least receive notification of that. They really abdicated that role. Basically, NATO, did what it wanted. The French dropped in weapons into the Nafusa Mountains. And then, I guess, to either reclaim its lead or its relevance, the UN, under Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, started this planning process. But it's all been done behind closed doors. He appointed a British diplomat, Ian Martin, to do it. And the result is a document that doesn't present different alternatives. It basically presents one alternative, which is it could easily have just been written in the State Department or in the Foreign Office in the UK, and this is the UN's plan.
So do they have authority to implement this? Because, of course, since the Resolution 1973 was passed, we've seen veto-wielding members of the United Nations say that NATO has gone too far and gone beyond the resolution.
Sure, that was said, and as you probably noticed, it didn't actually stop the dropping of weapons and the unfreezing of funds. The most recent fight at the UN has been whether unfrozen Libyan funds can be handed over to the National Transitional Council, since they're not. The UN itself hasn't recognized them yet. And basically the U.S. finessed that and called them the relevant authorities, but is providing them with the funds. But I'll give you an example. They really don't have a mandate. And in fact, in some places, this 10-page Martin plan says things like, we can do this without getting a new mandate from the Security Council, i.e., we can move peacekeepers from missions that already exist and put them in there. We can send military advisors. There's one line where they just say, they don't say this is controversial at all. They say, the Security Council's protection of civilians mandate implemented by NATO does not end with the fall of the Gaddafi government, and therefore NATO would continue to have some responsibilities. This is what I found surprising, because that's a controversial statement. That's certainly the position of some countries, but the idea that Ban Ki-moon would take that as his position without any equivocation is probably wrong.
So is there any indication as to why that would be and who's behind this? Because as you mentioned, you said that this could very well have emanated from the State Department or, the United Kingdom's foreign ministry. So how did that happen?
I mean, I think the reason Ban Ki-moon appointed this guy called Ian Martin, who's a longtime British UN official. He served in Nepal and Timor-Leste. I mean, I know him. He's a nice guy, but it seems like he wasn't clear on that he sort of mistook the UN wants to have a role in Libya. I mean, there are various UN agencies, like even the UN Office of Drugs and Crime is in the report, is wanting to send people, and so is UNDP. So he sort of harnessed the energy of bureaucrats that just want to be in the center of action and see Libya as this sort of great opportunity, maybe even as careerists to sort of further themselves. But it ends up being an agenda that really take sides, and I think that ever since it came out, they tried to say to me it's not a UN document. Now they've said it's a working document. But my own reporting among the people that prepared it is, not only is this document a sort of a take it or leave it, this is a UN plan. Even when the UN was purporting to try to mediate between the rebels and the Gaddafi government of the time, the UN just showed up and said, here's our idea. Instead of listening to both sides, who knows whether the mediation could have been successful. But they sent this guy called Al-Khatib, and it's sort of, I think this is not a fine day for UN diplomacy or even-handedness.
Well, speaking of diplomacy, at one time the African Union was seen as providing a good solution for diplomacy in Libya. Now we see that the African Union is largely left out of this United Nations plan. Is there a fallout from that, or one that's expected?
Sure, I mean, there is. I think in the most recent fight, South Africa, for example, took issue with this idea of turning over Libyan money to the TNC. At the same time, I mean, I think that they've kind of lost the PR battle in the sense that, they went to great pains to say, they're not on the side of Gaddafi, that it's just a matter of following their procedures. But the way many people within the UN see it, and I think that they have some basis to say it, is that the UN kind of uses the African Union when it's convenient. For example, it's an African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia because it's too dangerous for the other UN contingents. Mm-hmm. But where the African Union agrees with the UN, the African Union's view is given a lot of play. But where it doesn't, for example, in Ivory Coast, where the French and other powers wanted to enforce a pretty close election result and throw Gbagbo out, they just did it. They didn't really give any space to this African Union mediation. Same thing took place on Libya. Now, I know a lot of people that think the African Union is, should have been against Gbagbo, should be against Gaddafi, but the reality is you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you respect the African Union when they agree with you and then totally blow them off when they don't. And that's really what's
yes, you can. It's called a double standard, and you and I see a lot of them.
Okay,
but just really quickly, I just want to keep this going for one more minute.
Okay.
I want to know does this set the stage for UN or for NATO boots on the ground, and do you think that is the point?
Well, I mean, just to stick to the document itself, it says that if things remain unsafe, which apparently they are, at least at this point, that they could envision sending in not unarmed military observers, but actual peacekeepers. And the document even says that 2 member states have been shown what capacity would be needed. Now, I'm obviously trying. I have a pretty good sense who the 2 are, although I want to nail it down.
Oh, come on, who are they? Just give us your hunch. Give us your hunch.
I believe that one is France, just so you know it, that the dropping of weapons was no mistake. And so that's a European country. That would be a pretty controversial move. But I think the reality is I step back and look at it just sort of procedurally. The UN is not supposed to be sharing its secret nation-building plans with only 2 states. So from the beginning, when I first heard about the document, I kept asking, are you going to release it to the public, to the Libyan people, or at least to member states that supposedly control the organization? And they said no, but the document itself, when I got it, says that they've already shared it with 2 member states.
Well, do you know who the other member state is? I'm dying to know.
Yes, I did.
I'm dying to know.
It has the similar sound to an animal eaten at Thanksgiving in the United States. Okay,
all right, there you have it.
You can take that one however you want.
Was that a U.S. and a U.S. and France?
No, Turkey is an animal, and it's also the name of a country. I mean, this doesn't say that the 2 countries. This doesn't say that the 2 countries have said okay, and I think I really want to remain sort of, as a reporter, I want to say it's improper for the Secretariat to sort of deal with member states selectively. Now, you're saying it happens all the time. It does. The question that I have here is, now that it's exposed in this document, what are these member states going to do? The problem, you didn't ask this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The problem is that countries like Russia and China, okay, they were very suspect initially and throughout of NATO's role.
Right.
For that reason, you see China saying, we want the UN to be at the lead in Libya. Now they see the document that shows that the UN is itself siding with NATO. At the same time, they don't want to criticize the UN because to them, it's an alternative to NATO. The reality, when you look at the document, is meet the new boss, same as the old boss. But we have to see how that plays out. Most of them are now looking at Syria anyway, so it's sort of, they view what happened in Libya happened. Some people will get some jobs, pick over the carcass, get some oil contracts, and it's sad because there's it's a real turning point to say, like, is this a new kind of regime change? Could the actual rebels actually have say? Or, like, there have been demonstrations in Misrata against sort of foreign opportunists coming into Libya. But whether that they catch the ear of the TNC that's busy signing oil contracts, I don't know.
That we'll have to see. I certainly appreciate you for giving us the dirt that you have. Thank you. That was Matthew Lee, a journalist at InnerCityPress.com.